We're here today to talk about The Girls in the Dark with Avery Bishop, the author, who's very graciously agreed to join me to chat about his books, his writing, and all sorts of literary stuff. I've read the book. I loved it. This is a novel that will pull you in from the very beginning and hold you tight in its grips. It's about two girls who are kidnapped and what happens to them when they are held hostage, and then what happens 20 years later. Hi! It worked.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. I love it when the gods of technology cooperate with me.
Yes. Yeah, no, I didn't know if you wanted to talk about Nick Cage movies.
I would love to talk about that one movie. Before we go any further, let's tell everybody you've been posting stories about one of my all-time favorite movies, which is The Rock.
Yes. I mean, I saw somebody in the feed, some guy had posted one of the great scenes from that movie, and I'm like, yeah. I mean, it was a very intense scene,
Yes.
which is interesting because I actually then last night went back and looked at the screenplay of that scene, and it's so interesting how, you have a screenplay, and then through the director, through actors, through everything else, they eventually, what you see on screen, sometimes it's like, it doesn't read as intense. I don't know what I was saying. Oh, I think the score in that movie, I feel like the score really is the thing that makes it so intense.
Yes. I think, is it Hans Zimmer that wrote that score? I was going to look it up, but I didn't have time.
I want to say yes, but I'm not 100%. But it
I'm not,
feels
but I'll
like
double
that's the
check.
type of, yeah.
It's very reminiscent of the Pirates of the Caribbean music. Because I performed that in band a number of times, and we're doing it again this summer, actually. The Symphonic Suite for the Pirates of the Caribbean is a great band arrangement. And we actually played it on the beach in Hawaii one time when we went on a band tour. And the crowd just loved it. But it's kind of got that bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, that deep bass kind of. It's not a great song for the flutes and piccolos, unfortunately. But if I were a euphonium, I'd be all over it because it's that, that macho kind of, we're fighting the battle kind of thing. And every time I watch The Rock, I'm always hearing pirates in my head too. So I have to check and see who the person is. But, you can't go wrong. First, you got San Francisco, like one of the most beautiful places on earth. Then you got Alcatraz with all of its legend and lore, right? Then bring me Sean Connery, Ed Harris, and Nicolas Cage. I'm a happy woman. Give me a box of popcorn. I'm good.
Yeah. And I mean, that was part of the, like the holy trinity of Nick Cage action movies. You had Face Off and Con Air, which I feel like with all of those, I do love Face Off. I feel like Con Air is probably the third one on the list, which I still enjoyed. But The Rock, just because of Sean Connery and Ed Harris, I feel like The Rock is probably just goes right above Face Off, even though I really love Face Off too.
I will stop and watch The Rock anytime. They're breaking into Alcatraz. What else is there? Come on.
And here's the thing. And I actually wrote this essay for Crime Reads that they never published, which is a whole other story. But I feel like the great thing about Ed Harris's character is he is this like a lot of the villains, especially in '90s action movies. They're after just money or whatever else. Like he actually has this. His reason is like he has that empathy where I feel like the viewer is like, okay, yeah, we get why he's doing this.
Yep.
And so you don't really see a lot of that in a lot of villains nowadays. It's, they want to destroy the world or they want whatever else, where it's like he actually is kind of like fighting for his men and, he's going about it a way that you wouldn't necessarily agree with, but you're like, but I understand why he's doing it.
Well, and they're surrounded by a great supporting cast. When I go back and watch it, there are a bunch of those actors that you go, oh, that guy, who's that guy? Their face, and you've seen them in a million movies, but they're not necessarily household names. Okay, so let's talk about you.
Sure.
Let's talk about your writing journey. You don't have a very long bio on the internet. I looked. There's not much information out there. So let's start with, where'd you grow up?
I would say in terms of Avery Bishop, yes, because it is, it's a pseudonym. Under my own name, there should be a lot more stuff. But Pennsylvania,
Okay.
Central Pennsylvania, Still kind of live in Pennsylvania. I mean, I live in Harrisburg now. I grew up in Lancaster County. But yeah, Central PA.
Got it. So you're an East Coast guy. And when you were a kid, were you a big reader?
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading like the Hardy Boys, having a lot of the Hardy. I mean, and this was like those blue hardcover Hardy Boy
Yep.
books. And you know, I always when I tell this story, I always say that really it was in sixth grade when the first Jurassic Park movie came out.
Hmm.
And of course, you know, as a sixth grader, I mean, even now, I feel like that movie really holds up,
Oh, yeah.
despite, you know, the advancement in terms of technology, mostly because they were doing a lot of practical effects. But that really got me into reading Michael Crichton. And I started reading all of Michael Crichton books, even like the stuff that he had written under a pen name. And from Michael Crichton, I think it was in eighth grade, I read my very first Stephen King novel, which was Insomnia, which if you've read Insomnia is probably not the best introduction to Stephen King. I mean, I think it's a great book, but it's a very dense, it's probably like it's up there with like It and The Stand, like it's like 900 pages.
Yep.
But I remember finishing like, you know, the mass market paperback that I had gotten at the grocery store. And as soon as I had finished the book, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to, you know, I want to be like a storyteller because I had been like creative, like I had done, you know, like little stories here and there. But at that point was when I really made that kind of my passion or my mission in life.
Wow. You know, I remember reading Stephen King. We were all reading The Stand. I'm older than you are. We were reading it in high school.
Yeah.
And
Were
he
you
was
reading the uncut version or like the first version that came out, which was like kind of like the edited, you know, like the condensed version?
it was a mass market paperback and it was thick. And
Yeah.
I think it was a new book because everybody was reading it. I want to say even in a mass market paperback, wasn't it like
Oh, it was
900
still
pages?
thick, but yeah, at some point he released kind of like the uncut version, which, you know, I
Oh,
guess with whatever. I honestly can't even say because I think I had only read the uncut version, like what was different, but I think it was one of those. It was like one of his more earlier novels, and I felt like he had pressure from the publisher to kind of really cut out certain stuff that he didn't want to. And then when he got big enough where he could kind of be like, I want to revisit this and kind of put back all the stuff I, you know, really want to, because that's the whole thing. Usually a lot of give and take when you're working with a publisher or an editor, where sometimes they might not, you know, want you to include certain things. And
yeah.
sometimes you have to be willing to give up certain things. And, you know,
Hmm.
yeah. So,
Yeah, I didn't know enough about it at that time. And we didn't have the internet to go getting all this information at, readily
yeah.
at our fingertips. But because I graduated from high school in 1974, so I'm a fossil. But I remember reading his early books, and to this day, I can't turn the garbage disposal on without thinking about Firestarter. I mean, literally, it's like 50 years later or something, and every time I hit
Yeah.
the switch, I'm like, you know. But I remember staying up and I could not sleep after Pet Cemetery. I mean, he just was. And you know who else we were reading in high school? Thomas Tryon.
Mm.
I don't know if you ever read his books, but if you didn't, you got to go back and read The
His,
Other and
yeah.
Harvest Home. Scared the crap out of us. We were all very impressionable, and like I said, it was a much more innocent world. And we read all those crazy books and then talked about them and left them in our lockers and traded them, traded them and all that kind of stuff. So that's interesting. So you got the bug early.
Yeah.
And
And that's
then,
why a lot of my earlier stuff was a lot more supernatural, horror, speculative, just because at that time I thought, you know, I was going to be a horror
mhm,
novelist like Stephen
mhm,
King. And then even my earlier stuff, there was more thriller-esque. They were very fast-paced. They had a lot more. I even remember these two horror author friends of mine at one point had sat me down and they were like, why are you like hanging out with us? They're like, you're not really a horror author, you know? And at the time I felt very insulted. I was like, what? And I understood in retrospect, you know, what they were being like, you know, like it's clear that you know, you write because I feel like that happens a lot of times with writers where they kind of want to be a certain type of writer or they
mhm.
think they want to write a certain genre. And then at a certain point, they eventually kind of come home. They eventually start writing the thing that they really have that passion for, the thing that they really enjoy. And that's really kind of been me. I mean, even, I still have a lot of friends who write horror, and I just, I still enjoy it. I'll read it. I'll watch movies or whatever else. But like writing it, I just kind of feel like it's just not something I really feel comfortable writing. And not that I can't do it. I just don't feel like I can really do it as well as if I was writing more of a crime, mystery thriller type story.
Now, did you go to a college program and major in English or creative writing and do all of that formal preparation? Or how did you, as an adult, make your way into the writing world?
So I was content, basically just, in my high school job, I was working in a movie theater. And I think when I turned 18, so I think I was still a senior in high school, I had gotten like promoted as like assistant manager, and I was like starting to work up in the booth and stuff. And honestly, I would have been content just doing that and then like just writing. But my parents were very adamant, like, you have to go to college. So I was like, all right, fine. And so I went to like a local college. I was just commuting from home. And I went as for an English because it was like, I want to be a writer. Honestly, at that point, I didn't really know, it never even crossed my mind to take a creative writing course. Really? Like I wasn't even aware really like MFA programs were a thing, and the Iowa Writers Workshop even existed at that point. I was just completely oblivious. I was reading Stephen King, Michael Crichton, Reese, like a lot of horror authors at the time. So I went for English, and then I think after like my first year, I realized like, well, maybe I should just go to like for education. So be a teacher, that can be a thing that you do, and while you write, blah blah blah. And I did get my certification, but I ended up mostly just kind of subbing. I kind of fell in the trap of being a really good substitute, so they would always call me for everything. Yeah. And then I found out belatedly that like when you become like one of the reliable substitutes, they're never going to hire you for anything else in that school district because they know like, oh, we can just put him anywhere. So and after
good substitute is hard to find. Yeah. Very hard to find. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, there have been times too. I mean, there was nice flexibility. I remember one of my very first novels I wrote. I was still living at home at the time. I wrote 90,000 words in 3 weeks. It was my very first novel, or not my very first novel. It was one of my very first thrillers. And I was living from home. I was working in a movie theater. I would take my laptop to work up in the booth. So in between sets, I would write. And there were days where they would call me to come in and sub, and I would be like, I can't come in today because I wanted to just write because I was having so much momentum. Because I remember hearing, I think like going back to Stephen King, I think he wrote like The Running Man in a week. In a very fevered, probably 10,000 words a day. He wrote that in a week, which to be fair is one of his more, it's a shorter novel compared to a lot of his other stuff. But yeah, so there was great flexibility at the time. Being able to take my laptop to the movie theater, writing there, and then, basically just being able to say, hey, I'm not going to come in today, and then just, write.
Yeah. So how did you get published initially? What was the process to publication? Do you have a stack of rejection letters like some authors talk about, I have 150 letters in the closet that I've kept and I take out and look at, or?
Yeah, I mean, short stories. I'd always been writing short stories, so definitely have a bunch of short story rejections. I would say I really got in college was when I really decided to start working on novels. Right out of college, I think I got my first agent, and of course, in my head, I'm thinking like, oh, got my first agent. This is it. I'm going to sell a book. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to be a full-time writer, and that is not the case. And this was back in the days, God. Basically now I send my book to my agent, and then, once it's ready to go, she just emails it out to everybody. Back then, they were still like, we had to print out physical manuscripts. And so I remember going to, I don't know if it was Staples or something, and just having them print out 10 manuscripts, probably like 300, 400 pages each, and then mailing that to my agent, who in turn would then mail it out to publishers.
Yeah.
But we had gone through a couple different novels that we had submitted, and then, ended up parting ways with him and getting a different agent, doing some stuff. never really kind of connected. So I just kind of really built up a backlist of unpublished books. And I find that I have found that a lot of books get rejected by publishers, not necessarily because they're bad, just because it's not a right fit.
Right.
Because the agent sends it essentially to one editor at that house. That editor might not like it. Might be like, or it might be similar to something else they're working on. Another editor might love it, but so it's all. And sometimes people hate to hear this, but publishing is a lot of luck, a lot of chance, being at the right place at the right time, at the right editor, at the right publisher, coming out at the right time in the market. I always use the example of one writer I know who had a book come out like the week of, or the week before, or the week after 9/11. And of course, that just killed the momentum of anything that the book was going to have. And so there are things that sometimes are just out of our control that will happen. Even a lot of books during the pandemic. My very first Avery Bishop novel, 𝐀 𝐕𝐢𝐴Z𝐝 Mad, came out in 2020. It came out from Amazon Publishing. It was an Amazon first read, so I had a nice push from that. But had it come out in bookstores were closed. I mean, people probably don't remember, like bookstores were closed.
Yeah.
There was no way. So if you were a debut during the pandemic, of course there were no in-person like bookstore events, but people were not going to the bookstore. They were not browsing the shelves and the tables like they normally would. So there were just things that sometimes just happen that are just completely out of your control.
Right. So you write as Robert Swartwood, which is your real name, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I went on your website, and I think I saw 14 standalone books, plus some novellas, a couple of collections. I mean, you have quite a catalog now.
It's kind of like when you reach a certain age and you have to think about how old you are. I don't think about it anymore. I have reached that age.
Thinking about it.
But I've reached that in terms of like books. Like I really would have to sit down and think like, well, how many novels do I have? Yes, under my Robert Swartwood brand, a lot of standalones, a lot of series.
Yeah.
And those are just more straight up thrillers. Again, a lot of early stuff is more, supernatural or horror, crime thrillers. The Avery Bishop brand, like with the 𝐀 𝐕𝐢𝐴Z𝐝 Mad. Initially, that was going to be, I had thought it was going to be more of a Robert Swartwood novel. Because I had written novels. I'd written The Serial Killer's Wife under my name. I had written the Holly Lynn series, which is a female assassin series. So, I had written novels with main female characters. But at some point when I started working on 𝐀 𝐕𝐢𝐴Z𝐝 Mad, I just kind of knew instinctively I should probably use a pen name for this. Because it was a little bit of a different...
Let's go back for a minute. Because, so you have the Robert Swartwood, and then you come up with... I want to hear what the inspiration for the story was. Because, writers have all sorts of different ways they get an idea, like something just comes to them, or they read a news article, or where did the story hit you? Like, two girls kidnapped. What was it?
I want to say I was just browsing one day, I think in a Barnes & Noble. I came across a book, and there's these publishers do where they will do comps for other titles. They'll be like, this meets this is this type of book.
I hate
and
that.
Sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes it's wildly misleading.
Yeah.
And so I came across one book, and I could have sworn, and again, maybe this was a fever dream, because I went back recently to look at that particular book, and I can't find this comp on it. But the comp at the time was Sharp Objects meets Room, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And sometimes, oftentimes with I don't know, I'm sure it happens with other writers, I might hear a comp, and immediately my brain starts going a certain way that particular book or author, they went a completely different way. Because, I was talking to someone recently where people will talk about how acting is essentially just a series of choices. Mm-hmm. Every actor makes a certain series of choices. It's the same thing with writing. You give an idea to 10 different writers, they're all going to make different decisions or choices on how they're going to start the story, how they're going to, where they're going to take the story, what they're going to do, all these different things. So, for whatever reason, that idea stuck with me, and I immediately started thinking about if I were to, okay, that's interesting. And I just kind of, it was one of those books that just started in the back of my head. So honestly, some ideas will just come to me right away, and maybe I'll pitch it to my agent or whatever else, or it'll be a short story, and I'll just sit down and just do it. Other ideas, I will just it will just sit in the back of my head. And I never really will write down ideas unless I'm pitching something to my agent for like, a new idea for a book or a novella or whatever else. Because I feel like if I don't write it down and it's an idea that sticks with me, it's an idea that is worth writing. Because there are ideas I have that are probably over a decade old that I've just been thinking about and just kind of like seeing, just kind of seeing. And I just like, I know that if I sat down, I could probably write the entire book. I just don't have the time. But I know, and I just feel like it's worth writing. Like, like it's a story that wants to be told, as opposed to sometimes you might be like, oh, this was a great idea. And then a week later, you completely forget what it is. Yeah. Because, clearly, I guess something in my brain says like, it's not worth it.
Right. But if it sticks, then that's a good indicator, right?
I mean, at least for me, who knows what the market is going to say. So in terms of like The Girls in the Dark, so that was the initial seed. Again, how long it had been, I couldn't even begin to tell you. I mean, it's been years until I eventually sat down and really started thinking more about like, well, okay, so like the idea of like, room, these like what if and sharp objects, people have read sharp objects, yes, it's an adult story, but it also has the more teenage, almost YA, which is another thing I found that for whatever reason, a lot of times I don't know if it's specifically suspense books, but my other Avery Bishop novels, Girl Gone Mad, When You're Gone, primarily the main character is an adult, but it might have other characters, secondary characters who are, or like flashback chapters that, deal with kids in middle school or high school. And then people will be like, well, this is more YA, just because it happens to have some younger characters in it. They immediately want to say like it should be YA, and it's like, what are you talking about? But anyway, so the idea of sharp objects, because people have read sharp objects, obviously there is the the more I think there were high school age characters at the time, and it just kind of came from there. I mean, I would say like when I initially thought about the book was very different from what it ended up becoming. Which kind of goes back to the Robert Swartworth thing. I mean, at heart, I'm a thriller author.
Right. So
a lot of my books tend to like, I want to drag a lot of these stories more thriller when they really want to be more like a psychological suspense, which again was the reason for the pen name, because they're a little bit, they're more subtle. They're not as, yes, Girl Gone Mad, The Girls in the Dark. I feel like there are some, very thriller-esque scenes that take place.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of the stuff under my own name, like it's very, very fast-paced. It's like usually like takes place within the course of like 24, 48 hours, 72 hours, like, really quick condensed timeline, as opposed to like with this novel, I feel like it takes place over the course of, well, besides the flashbacks, but the present day is probably over the course of like a week or two. As opposed to, again, just like, this is going to take place, over the course of only like a few days.
Mm-hmm. So you did something interesting in this book, which I thought was very effective, and that was you had more than one timeline. So you had the modern day, and then you went back to the 20 years earlier when the girls were actually kidnapped, which, by the way, is just a terrifying scene when they go out by their house and this person grabs them. I'm just like, ugh.
So I will say, and this was a conversation I had with my agent too, like, because this is a very dark book.
Yes.
And like, I mean, when we were shopping this around, we did have more than one editor basically say like, I think this is too dark to publish. You're going to lose half of your audience. Personally, I feel like readers in this space love dark stuff. Like the darker, the better. Mm-hmm. But there were times initially where I did not want to go certain places. I don't know if it's maybe just because, I'm a male author writing these types of books and scenes, but it was the book. I don't know. Have you ever read The Quiet Tenant?
I have not.
French author. I mean, she's American. I would butcher her name if I try her name, but her first novel was The Quiet Tenant, and that's dark. You know what I mean? And having read that, I'm thinking like, okay, it almost like gave me the permission to be like, okay, I guess, really no holds bar. I mean, we can be dark. Now, granted, there are not, obviously some terrible things happen to these girls when they're
Yes.
away,
Yeah.
and we don't really, it's not on the page, which can be
Yeah.
argued that that's probably even worse because you let your imagination kind of run, wild. But obviously we didn't want to like specifically show certain things.
We
But
don't need to read it.
again,
We know what happened.
yeah, initially I was like, well, could this guy abduct them but not do certain things to them? It was just like, no, that's not realistic. You know what I mean? Like in a situation like this, certain things would happen and you just can't really shy away from it.
Right. But it's very effective the way you went back and forth, and you took the reader with you, because to stay back there for that 147-day period, or a chunk of it, progressively seeing what happens to these girls, I think would be darker than the way you did it, where you bring them back to real time, and it's Megan that narration. I'm sorry, I was getting a phone call. It's her first person narration of what's going on in real time, where she's back with her family and certain things are starting to happen that she's wondering about. We don't want to give away too much.
Yeah.
So first of all, how did you decide to tell it that way? And second of all, how did you write it? Did you write, because I've heard some authors say they write just the whole story back to front and they're hopping back and forth as they're writing, or they write two separate narratives and then they mush them together somehow. So how did you go about doing that?
This was a book where I feel like, so one of my earlier Avery Bishop novels was called When You're Gone, and that has 3 different timelines running concurrently.
Mm-hmm.
Where you had a present day story, where basically, just real quick, so in When You're Gone, the main character, her daughter, basically disappears. And a year goes by, no one's heard from her. They have no idea what happened to her. And then in the middle of the night, the mom gets a text message from her, basically being like, "Mom, please help me. I think he's going to kill me." And then we find out that like, she's been abducted by like a police officer or somebody in law enforcement, and she's being held, but she managed to get this message to her mom. And so we had a timeline of from the daughter's point of view, the day that, basically the day of, I think it was the homecoming, where like, from the morning until the evening for when, we find out what happened. And then we have the present day story of the mothers, and then also the past of the story right after her daughter goes missing. And so that was a very tricky novel to write, because I had those 3 different timelines running, and I told those in a very, very specific way. So I'm not really somebody who like writes out an outline or specifically, but that was one where I really did have to sit down and say like, okay, if I'm going to write it in this particular way, I got to make sure I really do have an idea of these timelines. So it's a little bit different in terms of The Girls in the Dark, where I definitely had my present day story and I had my past day story. I mean, again, it was just a dual timeline where it was a little bit easier to write because I wasn't like juggling so many different timelines. So, and obviously I knew that we were going to, the first flashback was going to be the girls being abducted. Although technically, I guess the first flashback is kind of like the opening or prologue, with Megan having escaped, and then that kind of opens up, or with whatever else. But I did not really sit down. I mean, I'm a writer who usually like, and this honestly I've had arguments in the past, because there are certain editors who really do want to see, like, they want to know a full synopsis, like,
Right.
beginning, middle, and end. And I'm just like, I can't give you that because I have no idea what it is. I mean, for me, I love kind of like that. I think it was Stephen King that talked about, like, it's what did he say? It's like you're at a dig site or whatever. And I mean, you're just kind of like, chiseling away, and, the story just kind of comes. And, like for me, I love not knowing. Yes, I have an idea where I'm going to take the story. I have a broad overview, where, like, again, I think I know where the story is going. I think I know who some of these characters are. I think I know what potential twists are going to be. But then certain things happen that, like, and again, I don't want to give too much away for people who have not read the book yet, but there were certain characters, like, we have the main character in present day where she's being stalked. Initially, that was just going to be some rando. And then I realized, to tie it back to her past, because initially, and this happens pretty early in the story, so it doesn't really give anything away, but like when she comes home, it's just her sister. That was the initial thing. But then it was the idea like, let's bring in a friend. And then that kind of changed the dynamic of other things. So again, it was one of those things where it's just like, had I started writing, I never would have known that this would potentially, but again, as you're telling the story, as you're seeing how certain things are coming together, you start seeing like, well, what if, and it's always that, well, what if, that would be interesting. Because for me, I hate coincidences. When you read a novel and things just like, it's that Deus Machina, and it like just happens because the writer is like, well, this has to happen here because I want this to happen or whatever else. Like for me, and again, I understand that, but I feel like there should be a reason for things. Like,
Absolutely.
like if this, like, it's just like, sometimes you read a book and it's just like, how is this just randomly, I don't know. Like, it's one of those like little pet peeves of mine where things are just like, everything is coincidence. It's like, sometimes, yes, okay, there could be coincidence, but I don't know. For me, I kind of feel like maybe it seems like coincidence, but there's other things happening behind the scenes so
it sounds like you wrote it as one continuous document,
yes.
opposed to going back and trying to put them together.
Yeah, like I was not writing. So like I was usually writing as I was going the flashback scenes.
Okay.
Now, having said that, there were times through the editing process where I might realize, like, for me, it's always, I have to look at every chapter or every scene, which I think I remember, I don't know, again, going back to the idea of decisions and choices. I remember, I think James Patterson talking about how, he doesn't feel like he writes chapters, he writes scenes, which again, it makes a lot of sense. When you're reading a book, a chapter essentially is a scene or a series of scenes that are taking place. And so, yes, there were in the editing process, I think even with my agent and when we went through with the publisher, oftentimes I ask myself, like, do I need this chapter? Do I need this scene within a chapter? And if the answer is no, if you can take it out or if you can summarize it a different way or whatever else, then why is it there? I always go back to the Elmer Leonard, one of his 10 rules of writing, like leave out the parts readers tend to skip. There are times where I'm sure you've read a book and you're like, why is this here? You're like, why is this needed? And it's like, are they just trying to like pad this novel, or like, do they have to like hit a certain like word count or whatever else? So yes, there were certain, I think maybe one or two flashback chapters that we maybe condensed or kind of took out, or maybe even, but like, yes, as I was writing it, I was basically exploring those flashback chapters as I was writing it, the same with the present day chapters. And for me, and the same thing too with, One Year Gone, and even with Girl Gone Mad, I like the present day, to end a present day chapter in a way to leads into the flashback chapter that then leads into the present day chapter. So like there was a scene where I think present day, she basically talks about how she has to go see her mother. And then we open up the flashback chapter where one of the sisters is like, what do you think mom and dad are doing? You know what I mean? Just kind of like that type of thing. So even though we are jumping in time, there's a little bit of this like overlapping transition that kind of makes it, because I guess it can be jarring sometimes. Although I feel like readers in this space are so used to the very dual timeline of jumping back and forth in time. Which honestly, I initially had really resisted. Like Girl Gone Mad has some flashbacks in it, but I wasn't doing the now then type chapters. It was structured a little bit differently. Whereas opposed to this is, we have now, I think was it before and now, just jumping back in time, especially at the end where we really start jumping back and forth. And that was a conversation I had with my editor at the time too, because I don't think she was really a fan of that. And I'm like, No,
Oh,
that was one where I
yeah.
really pushed for because I'm like, we need this really quick back and forth. I said, like for me, I love how like Christopher Nolan cross cuts his scenes, especially at the end of movies, and other directors do it as well. And obviously, you can't really do that specifically in novel form, but in a way you can if you do it, a certain way. And that was the idea where I felt like we need a lot of this back and forth because so much is happening and we're getting to certain reveals and twists
Oh, yeah.
that if we spent too much time in the present or too much time in the past, it just loses that momentum in the pacing.
Oh, I thought it was very effective the way you did that because the pace then is just picking up, picking up, picking up, and you start reading frantically almost because you
Yeah.
know you're going to find out what exactly is going on. And for me, it heightened the suspense and just made me want to keep reading because when you're hopping like that, you're giving us nuggets of information and it's all starting to come together. So yeah, you sticking to your guns, I think, was the right move because at least from my perspective, that was one of the best parts of it. Um, you also did something here where you took on a female voice, which some male authors find they don't want to do. But you did it and you did it very effectively. Did you have any qualms about doing that or have you done that in the past?
No, I mean, again, my first Avery Bishop novel, Girl Gone Mad, first person, past tense, from a female point of view. And again, I've written other novels under my own name, like the Holly Lynn series is a female assassin series. Those are, first person present tense from a female. And then the Serial Killer's Wife. That was a third person book, but primarily was from the main character's point of view. I don't. I do get asked this often, and never
Yeah.
have a really good answer, just because I just don't think about it. I just
Okay.
the character, I just start writing either from a character's point of view or whatever else. I don't know if it's because I just read a lot of books, either in this space or or literary novels or whatever else. I mean, I do have, I mean, my agent's female. As to date, all of my editors for all my Avery Bishop books, even my Audible originals, have been female. So like, I do get feedback if there are certain things that maybe it might be like, well, this doesn't really sound right or whatever else. But honestly, even that's has been minimal in the past. It's just one of those things where again, I don't really think about it. It's just, that's the character. That's,
Well, you
yeah.
did it very effectively. That's why I was wondering if it was something that you had to work at or think about, because there was no point when I was reading it as a woman saying, oh, a female wouldn't say that, or a female, especially a young girl, because these are young women when they're being, kidnapped. There was nothing there that made me go, that's not something a person that age would say, or that's not something a woman would say. So,
Yeah.
again, well done. I thought that was very effective. Did you know, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but did you know the big twist when you started writing it? Because
Well, so my
it's a big one.
initial, yeah, so my initial idea for this was very, like I said, it was very different. Had a very similar setup, but went in a completely different direction. Again, a more kind of thriller-esque direction that was very, very different. And so, but again, it was one of those things too that just didn't really kind of feel right. And then after some discussions with my agent, it was like, well, what if instead? And again, it's really hard to discuss this without giving things away.
Yeah, and
But
we
yeah,
don't want we don't want to spoil it
like,
because we want people to
but
buy the
like
book and read it.
once I got to a certain place, I mean, yes, there was always that twist in the back of my head.
Okay. Okay.
It was always that thing of kind of like heading toward. But again, it was also doing, and for me too, I always feel like when it comes to writing twists or surprises, I want them to be earned. I want them to be genuine. And the reason I say that is sometimes I've read certain books where there are these twists that, and I've seen some readers say that this particular twist comes out of nowhere, and I'm like, you have no idea how much like how many seedings along the way. Like I feel like like, and I did this with one of my other novels, like the under my own name, The Killing Room. Like, and that's one where there's a big twist, like like 80 pages in, which changes the whole, because I love certain books where you sit down and you start reading it and you think it's going to be one thing and then something happens and it becomes a completely different thing. But like writing it in a certain way so that if you go back and read it, you can see like, oh, it's very obvious from the very beginning, because like I write, like I write the character, or I write the voice, or I write the way things happen a certain way so you can't go back later and been like, I cheated. Been like, well, well, there's no way that we could have figured this out because then this happened, this happened. It's like, no, if you go back, you'll see that, things were done in a certain way, or like certain things happened that, again, it's hard to discuss without giving without giving too much away. But yeah, there are times like there are certain books, and I have one book in my head right now that just always stays with me, where I'm like, that is the biggest cheat in the world, because the way it was set up, there was just no way. Like it just, again, it was not fair. And like everyone's like, oh my God, I didn't see it coming. It's like, yeah, you didn't see it coming because it's a complete cheat. It's like, there's no way that, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I feel like the really great twists are the ones that, you get to and you're like, of course, because it's like, oh, it makes sense because everything else that came before it, not the ones who are like, that just came out of nowhere. And it's like, and then also where like certain characters or a narrator like is just keeping, like, obviously narrators are going to kind of keep certain things away from the reader. That's just inevitable. But again, it's doing it in a way that is, again, not like a complete cheat. Like, again, there was another recent book I read recently, which was a really big book. And it's like, and it was one of those, like, I think like 3 or 4 different narrators. So like we're seeing like different points of view. Mm-hmm. And you get to the end and you find out like somehow all these narrators were also keeping all this other information from the reader. And it was, again, it was like, it boggles my mind where like people are like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like, really? I don't know. It's like, okay, it's like, I guess that's just not the type of book that I write. Like, again, I try to, and again, I know some people might not, might kind of dismiss it or be like, but it's like, I try to be very thoughtful in terms of making it so it's not a cheat. So it's not a thing where you get to the end and you get to a big twist, or you get to any of the other twists and you're just like that makes no sense, or it comes out of nowhere. And it's like, no, it's there. You may have missed it, but like, like all those things were seeded in, and so that, when you get to certain places, it's, yeah.
Well, confession, I suspected it.
Yeah. Which, and honestly, inevitably with this type of book, that's going to be, I mean, it's, yeah.
But I didn't know till I got there,
Yeah, I mean, I've seen certain reader reviews where people are just completely, like never suspected it. Other ones may have suspected it, but then as you're reading it, they're like, well, you know what I mean? Like, and then I've heard some people being like, yeah, I suspected it, but at the same time, it didn't really take away from my enjoyment of the novel because of
no,
blah,
not
blah,
at all.
or whatever else. But I mean, with this type of novel and the type of setup, like, inevitably, you know what I mean? Like, there's just no other way to get around it, which was something, a conversation I had with my agent and with the editors, especially with how they were marketing it. I was just like, let's just make it very clear these are sisters. You know what I mean? Like let's not push the certain angle. Like,
and I play games when I'm reading thrillers, because I read a lot of thrillers, right? So, and I'm a retired lawyer. Hello. I'm always looking for facts and evidence and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'm always playing the game with the author, like, okay, let's see if you can get me.
Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, that's
the fun of it, right?
I mean, I understand that I am writing in a genre where, like, again, I almost feel like at this point, readers in this space have seen everything. So it's always trying to kind of come at a new angle, or to somehow do something fresh or something new if possible, because it feels like at this point, everything has been done to death. And so inevitably, and again, I feel like, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like when I'm reading it, I'm reading it to enjoy it. Like, I'm not reading it from page 1 to try to solve the murder. You know what I mean? Unless it becomes very obvious. And sometimes it becomes obvious, you're like, well, that's too obvious. There's no way. You know what I mean? It becomes one of those things. But like, I feel like sometimes certain readers do kind of sit down and they're like, they have like their like Sherlock cap on, and they have like a notepad, and they're like, I'm going to solve this first. And it's like, okay, like, but are you enjoying it? I mean, if that's how you enjoy the book, great.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. But no, I mean,
Well,
it completely makes
I'm
sense
always
with
trying
what you're
to
saying.
stay a step ahead, but I'm enjoying it in the process because I'm at a
Yeah,
point in my life where I only read for enjoyment.
yeah,
I spent reading was such a huge part of my career, reading and writing, and it was, cases and facts and reports and summary, and all that kind of stuff that you have to deal with when you're practicing law. And so now I'm just reading for fun. If it's too much work, I'm done. I don't want, no, I'm not in,
So when you were practicing law, were you reading then?
Yes, I also read for enjoyment, but not nearly as much as, I
Yeah,
can now,
time
obviously.
wise,
But
yeah.
yeah, I've always been a reader. Now there was a period of time when my kids were young, and I was working full time or like finishing law school and then starting my practice of law and also still working as a musician part time on the side. And I just didn't have time to read for
Yeah.
a few years. It was if I picked up, 4 or 5 books a year, maybe it was good. But as soon as the kids got bigger, like I found when they were teenagers and I was home in the evenings, they wanted to walk out of their rooms and know that I was in the house, but they didn't really want to have anything to do with me. They were just like, if they'd had bathrooms and kitchens in their bedrooms, I would never have seen them. They came out to use the restroom or to graze for food because they were eating all the time because they were boys. And they go, okay, yeah, mom's here. All right. And then they're good. They just, that's normal teenage stuff, right? So when we hit that point, then I was able to start pursuing a few more things that were meaningful for me, so long as I was there and available to them. And if they needed homework help, they'd be out or whatever. But now I'm
When did you
retired.
start the like doing these Instagram lives?
I just started doing the author chats a few months ago, but I started reviewing books like in 2010.
Oh, wow.
I established my website in 2005, and it started out not with book reviews, but with just a bunch of other writings, about a lot of things. And then in 2010 was when I first started reviewing books. So I've been at this for quite some time.
But what made you want to get into having these chats?
Because I love the Zooms and things that I get to do with authors. I love interacting with people and having conversations because, that was a big part of my job and who I am. And also, I've been trying to reach out to a lot of authors who people may not have found their books or, because like sometimes I've had you were a new to me author. And I thought, well, if he's new to me, he's probably new to other people too. And
Oh,
so my
incredibly
whole
grateful. Yeah.
well, my whole function here is to help you sell books. So let's hold it up again. That's what these chats are about, And
And it's going to
and
be
I live in a town that authors don't tour it. Nobody comes to Lodi. Hello, nobody. Half the time they don't even come to San Francisco or Sacramento. If they hit California, they're in like LA or San Diego. Newsflash, that's 400 miles away.
Well, what's kind of exciting about this book is so Bookouture is owned by Hachette.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a lot of other publishers, they're usually owned by massive companies. One of the imprints of Hachette is Grand Central Publishing. So a very, very small percentage of Bookouture titles get repackaged by Grand Central Publishing, such as The Housemaid. And this one actually is going to be republished by Grand Central in January. So it will be in bookstores like Barnes & Noble and Book a Million. So that's exciting. So, it'll be a whole new potential readership because right now Bookouture, it's a lot more digital, like a lot more ebook. We have the audiobook, which is narrated by Brittany Presley. For people who listen to audiobooks, Brittany is one of the best. So, but no, I mean, incredibly grateful for you to, for the invite and for doing what you do. I mean, I'm always incredibly grateful for anybody there's so many books out there. I mean, just for like a normal reader to just decide, okay, I'm going to spend potentially hours of their life, basically reading something that you wrote. I mean, I'm always grateful, incredibly grateful to any type of reader or whatever else, but especially to you bookstagrammers who then help try to spread the word for the books that you enjoy. It's amazing.
We need to give a shout out to Tanya. and thriller book lovers the pulse, because I don't remember how I found her, but it was last year sometime, and she started, offering me the chance to read books and, review them. And I've discovered a whole bunch of authors through her that I probably might not have heard of before. And she's clogged up my to be read stack significantly. So thanks, Tanya. And I mean, she's just delightful and easy to work with. And when yours came up and I read the synopsis, I went, okay, well, let's check this out. So, then I loved it. The only problem with that is that now I want to go read everything you've ever written, which I won't live long enough to. I won't live long enough to read them all, but I'm going to go back and get some of them. But let me ask you another question while we're on this subject of readers and finding authors and stuff. So here you are, you're plugging along your Robert Swartwood. I don't know why I have trouble saying that one. Swartwood. And then you decide you're going to be Avery Bishop. Now, I'm guessing it's because they're a different type of books, different marketing strategy, but we all know that you're Robert. I mean, are you going to at some time just merge your two identities, or are they going to stay separate?
I mean, as of right now, they're probably going to stay separate, because the Avery Bishop brand, we have this one being coming out from Grand Central. I still have a relationship with Audible. I have a new Audible original that'll be coming out at some point. I have another book with it, Book of Torah, that'll be coming out. I definitely have ideas for both. I mean, I definitely have it's an idea that's more of a Robert Swartwood novel, because there will be times where I'll have a conversation with my agent. And we'll be, I remember it's rare, but sometimes I might tell her a certain idea and she'll think it's more of an Avery Bishop. And I'm like, no, I think it's more of a Robert Swartwood because of X, Y, and Z. But yes, I mean, it really comes down to marketing. I mean, honestly, I had told, and it's really not a state secret, but Riley Sager, his real name is Todd Ritter. It's in the copyright of all of his books. So, and Riley Sager is his second pen name. He had written 3 mysteries under his own name, which did not really sell. He ended up writing a different novel, which I think is more like kind of like a historical mystery fantasy type thing under a different pen name, which did not really sell.
I have to throw something in here, because Alex Finlay. I started reading his books as Anthony Franzi, and they were legal thrillers.
Yeah. And actually, Anthony, as Alex, just gave me a really great blurb for this because of the, it will be in bookstores, so we wanted to try to get whatever else. But yeah, so I mean, and I had told the first time I met Todd Ritter as Riley Sager at one of his events, I told him, I said, thanks to you, like I probably would have ended up with because there was like J.P. Delaney, A.P. Finn, or A.J. Finn. There was a lot of like men writing these types of, books under pen names. Just like back in the day, a lot of females would write under pen names because, publishing was more of a male dominated. I mean, there was, God, what was the name? I can't even think of it. But anyway, so, so basically it just kind of, because some people might disagree with me, but I don't think Gone Girl would have been as big of a book as it was if it was by John Smith. Gone Girl, John Smith. I don't know. I just kind of feel like, even like, did you ever read Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson?
Yes.
I remember reading somewhere his agent, when he sent it out
years ago, she put
his initials in a thing instead of his name, because I think they knew that, it was going to be it was going to sell, because it was more kind of that gender neutral type thing. And so we knew with this one, I told Riley Sager, if it wasn't for him, I would have ended up with initials instead of, I decided like, I want to do more of like a gender neutral pen name, like Alex Finlay, like Riley Sager. And so specifically, I mean, those are those types of books. Some people, I feel like ultimately people they want to read a really good book, despite whoever the author might be. Mm-hmm. There are we had, I remember when we first were shopping around, like the Avery Bishop, Girl Gone Mad, there were some editors who made it very clear that they did not like the fact that I'm a man writing these types of books. And there are some readers who are very much like you had very kindly said that I did a really good job of making, writing a female perspective. I don't know if it's because they know I'm a man, but immediately it's like, men should be writing, you know what I mean? Like, and so again, I mean, every writer is yes, every writer is different, but every reader is different too. I mean, there are certain things that the people enjoy, certain things that they take away from certain things. But I will see some reader reviews sometimes being like, like, oh, I really love her books, or I think she did a great job. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's a compliment because, it's obviously, whatever I'm doing as an author for these types of books, I'm doing well because, again, there are times where you will read maybe even a book written by a female author from a male perspective, and you can just tell, like, this doesn't sound right, or it's not reading right. And so, yeah.
Well, I think we all know in this day and age, at least I hope we all know, that gender is a fluid concept. And I hope that, we can get past some of those stereotypes and things, and it's just simply a good book that's well written. And I don't really care who wrote it as long as it wasn't AI.
So yeah, there's one novel I have done. Actually, it was the Avery Bishop novel that we had kind of shopped around. It's a novel I really love. And it's very similar to kind of my novel, The Killing Room, under my name, in that it has a very standard setup, but there's a really big twist that kind of changes the entire thing. And I feel when we were shopping it around, editors get very overworked. They get bombarded with submissions, especially now that everything's digital, that they're probably only reading up to a certain place and being like, well, see nothing here. But it's one of those things, because I have a lot of different characters. There are a lot of male characters, a lot of female characters, that my agent and I have discussed. They're like, is this really an Avery Bishop novel? And I had joked at one point, being like, well, maybe it can be an Avery Bishop and Robert Swartwood novel, so I can kind of like do a collaboration with myself. I don't know. We'll see. One of those days that book will see the light of day. I don't know when or how, but it'll definitely get out there. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be straight up. I think it's an Avery Bishop novel, because even look at like Riley Sager. I mean, most of his novels have been main female characters, but I think it was, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, like The Middle of the Night was his very first novel written under, but even look at like Harlan Coben, like, the majority of his novels, main characters are usually a male, but he's written several novels with a female, point of view. So like I even have certain ideas that I want to write under my real name, Robert Swartwood, that have main character as a female. But again, they lean much more dark crime, dark thriller, as opposed to the more psychological suspense. And again, ultimately, it's all the same, but it comes down to really more publishing, how they want to basically categorize things, how they want to with whatever else. And the sad reality is, it also comes down to just sales. I mean, that's why Riley Sager is Riley Sager, not Todd Ritter, because even his agent had told him when he wrote Final Girls, and he was real proud of the book. He wanted to send it down under his own name, and his agent was very much like, okay, but if it sells, they're going to look at your past sales, and they're not going to give you a big advance, if any, and they're probably going to give you a crappy cover. And no, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's publishing is a crazy business.
I hear that from a lot of the authors that I chat with or that I watch on Zooms, and that it's an industry that I don't think I would probably last in very long. I'd probably just throw something at the wall and be done.
It is very frustrating.
Say
I always
that about
say that
law,
publishing
too,
is
but
an awful business. The only reason writers stay in it is because they love telling stories, because so many writers come and go. I mean, you see, sometimes there will be big books. A big book will come out, and that author will publish one novel, and then they might publish a second novel, which doesn't do nearly as well as that first novel because of the big push. And then you might never see from that, from that author again. Yeah. So it's always a testament. In fact, going back to Riley Sager, I don't want to keep talking about this, but his 10th novel is coming out in just a couple months, and he's on tour, and he was very kind to ask me to, in Harrisburg, when he's coming to Midtown Scholar, the local bookstore, I'm going to be kind of interviewing him. So I'm completely honored to kind of be at his event. But again, it's his 10th novel. Some authors never go more than 2 or 3 books before their career kind of sizzles out. So, I mean, it's amazing when an author publishes more than like 2 or 3 novels with the same publisher, and now he is on his 10th novel. So, and then going back to Alex Finlay, I mean, for people who have not read it, The Anniversary is I think is his best book, at least I've only read a handful of his so far. I haven't read all of his books yet, but The Anniversary is amazing. So,
Well, and I love his legal thrillers, so I would encourage people to go look up Anthony Franz or Franzi. I'm not quite sure how you say it. It's Franze, his real name. And go find his legal thrillers because a couple of them are set at the Supreme Court and they're just excellent. And listen, coming from a lawyer, if I'm recommending a legal thriller, you know it was done well and probably written by a lawyer.
Have you mentioned David Ellis, though. Have you read some of David Ellis's earlier stuff?
Yes, I have, and I love him, and I'm going to be chatting with him next month. He agreed to chat with me.
That's right.
And I'm very
his
excited.
New book's coming out.
Because his new book is amazing.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yes, I love his books. I also love, Scott Turow. I mean, come on, right? If it's Scott Turow, I'm going to read it. I love David Baldacci. I mean, you're going with Grand Central. Congratulations on that because they write some of my favorite authors. Harlan Coben, who you mentioned, Baldacci, and Lisa Scottolini. I mean, they've got some big, big names, and they've got, I would think, the marketing machine to help you really reach readers. So that's a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. I mean, it definitely will have the distribution. I've been with some publishers in the past where there's just no distribution, and the book really just kind of lives and dies on whether or not you can get into bookstores. And again, and the sad reality is, even if you get into bookstores, it doesn't necessarily mean the book is going to sell. A lot of authors basically, again, goes back to the sales records. I mean, even though a book is in bookstores, does not necessarily mean it'll sell, but you're definitely getting it to people who, book people, your readers want to find books. Where do they find books? They find them in bookstores.
I heard something interesting from Caitlin Rother, she's been one of my favorite authors. I've been reading her books for many years. She did a lot of true crime, and now she's got her fictional books out. She's with Thomas and Mercer, which I didn't know was an Amazon imprint, and she was very candid in talking with me last week about the fact that she cannot get into bookstores because it's an Amazon imprint. So, like, Barnes & Noble won't carry her books.
No, Barnes & Noble, a lot of, Colleen Hoover publishes now with, I think, like, Montlake is their, like, romance imprint. Now, you'll find Colleen Hoover novels in Barnes & Noble and some independent bookstores because it's Colleen Hoover. Like it really comes down to sales. Like, these booksellers, the majority of them, they want to sell books. So they will sometimes with some of the Amazon titles, they will have it. But yes, I've heard a lot of Amazon authors. In fact, my first two were with Lake Union, their suspense book club imprint. It was never even really a question of trying to like approach any booksellers to have anything. But there was one author, I don't want to say who it is, but she had published traditionally, and then she had some with Amazon Publishing, and then she kind of came back with traditional. And at some book event, one of the book managers was there, and was like, "So it didn't work out with Amazon Publishing, did it?" Like they were holding a grudge after all these years. Which again, I mean, but here's the reality. Sometimes, like with Caitlin. And I think I had this conversation with her because I had interviewed her because I do like a live stream too. I feel like there was no other interest. You know what I mean? Like sometimes the only people who are interested is an Amazon publishing editor. And as a writer, you got bills to pay, like you have to make money. So it's like, I mean, yes, sometimes, yes, if you have that option, it could be at bookstores, but here's another reality of it is that even if you go into bookstores, your book might not sell. Right. I mean, I know some Amazon publishing authors who do extremely well. And so it's just, again, it's a crazy business. There are no guarantees. You just got to, people just, I guess, kind of stick in it because they love, telling stories.
Well, listen, I need to let you go because we've been on here for over an hour and I know it's late where you are. It's evening time.
It's only 6 p.m.
Probably dinner
but
time.
No, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, well, I'm retired. So we can do this again. And this is the book that's currently out. And I love this cover. I love this artwork where they took the flower and split it. It's so representative of the fact that you have twins as the main characters. Tell me what's coming next. Do you have another book? An Avery Bishop book that's coming out that we can look forward to?
So I'm currently working on a new book. Really early days on that one. I imagine that one's going to be out next year. Um, I had an Audible original that came out last August called The Chateau. Christine Lakin was the narrator. Uh, Basically, my deals with Amazon or my deals with Audible is they usually have an exclusivity for a certain period of time. So probably towards the end of August, that will be released as a paperback ebook. So that will be coming out later this year. And again, that's called The Chateau. And again, there will be a new Avery Bishop novel coming out from Bookouture, I imagine sometime next year. When, I don't know yet because I'm still working on it. And again, The Girls in the Dark will be in bookstores in January from Grand Central Publishing. Which, by the way, so the title, I'll be honest with you, my preferred title was "I'll Come Back for You," which I feel like plays such a big part of that novel.
That
I
would
know
have
the
worked.
publisher wanted to go a little bit more. I mean, The Girls in the Dark works, but here's the thing. And so, under my name, I have a book called The Killing Room, which
Huh?
is one of my more recent novels. It won the ITW Thriller Award. It's been optioned for TV. When we shot
That's
that
exciting.
around, it was under a completely different name,
You sort of
and the
buried the
publisher
lead.
and
Wait, go back. Option for
yeah,
TV? That's
the Killing Room
exciting.
has been, yeah. Well, yes, it is exciting. At the same time, it also means nothing. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff. I've had a lot of writer friends who have had stuff optioned. Like sometimes option just means that they're just kind of holding on to it for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the case here, but sometimes certain networks or studios might option something because they don't want anybody else to get it. They're essentially trying to kill it. But yeah, again, I'm not holding my breath. It would be amazing if something does happen, but a lot of stuff gets optioned. Very few stuff actually gets made. Sometimes stuff gets made, but then, they might do a pilot or whatever, but then doesn't even actually get, on streaming or wherever else. So very, very long road
But
ahead.
at
I'm not,
least you
again,
got
it'd be amazing.
optioned. So that
Yeah, the way
means
I view it, it's some
there's
free
a
money.
possibility, right?
There is a possibility. But basically, real quick. So with that novel, we came up with the title after the fact, The Killing Room, and I was able to work it in. You know what I mean? Like I hate when sometimes a title just feels very slapped on at the last minute, and you're like, I guess I kind of see how it worked. So for The Girls in the Dark, that was not the original title, and when the publisher basically was like, well, this is what we're going to publish it as, it was like, okay. And I basically still kind of in the editing phase, so I was able to kind of go back and I made it so that it fits more. Where we find out that like her book when she was, her book was called that, and so it kind of worked. But
Yeah.
initially, when we shopped it around, the title was "I'll Come Back for You," which I feel like is, again, in my heart, I kind of like, but at the same time, yeah, I'm okay with the other title too.
Well,
It's
maybe they'll
publishing.
make it
You
into a
get used to it.
movie and they'll call it "I'll Come Back for You."
Maybe.
Maybe. All right. One last question for you before I let you
Yeah.
run. Because when people watch these videos, as you probably know, there's something they always want to know, and that is, what are their favorite authors reading? So 2 or 3 books you've read recently that you recommend?
Well, right now, one of the books I'm reading, and I am taking my time with it, is A Violent Masterpiece by Jordan Harper.
I love Jordan Harper. I haven't gotten to it yet, but I love his books.
It's a really good follow-up to Everybody Knows. It's essentially set in LA, some of the main
Yes.
storylines. So I would really recommend people read Everybody Knows before they read A Violent Masterpiece. It's mostly different characters, but again, there is some overlap. But his writing, in fact, I had told Jordan the first time I met him, I had read another novel before I read Everybody Knows. And it was one of those novels where it was one of those, and I, it was almost like, how did this get published? Like the writing was just so bad. And then having read his, sometimes you just immediately know on page one, just if the book is just going to be, and just his writing is just so good. And so I'm taking my time with that book. I probably could have finished a week or two ago, but I don't know. It was one of those books where I just really appreciate the writing aspect of it.
I would
whereas
hold up
opposed to
Everybody
some,
Knows, but it's in the other room. I don't have it, but I'll put a
yeah.
note in the caption about it because I
Yep.
love that book.
So, yeah, and I mean, all of
And
Jordan's
also The
books. I
King of
mean, even
California
Bishop's
too.
King
His
California,
book after The
which
King
I ended up
California.
after I ended up tracking down the UK version because that was initially published in the UK
Oh,
before the US version came out. So I had read, I think Everybody Knows, and I think I had already had She Rides Shotgun. I hadn't read that. Yeah, this is now a Jordan Harper fan club video, but yeah, he's great.
yeah.
And I started listening to just recently. Usually I don't know about you, but I usually read a lot of books at the same time. So
Usually one or two at the same time.
I usually read either like a paperback or hardcover. I usually have some type of Kindle version going at the same time. I usually have an audiobook going at the same time. So right now I'm listening to Mad
Oh yeah,
Maple, Mad Mabel.
yeah. Sally Hepworth.
Um, and I'm reading on Kindle. I'm reading it's either Run Elizabeth or Elizabeth Run, which was a first novel. The author's name is escaping me right now. I'm only like maybe 10% in, but I'm enjoying it so far. And then I'm also usually reading a short story collection as well.
Okay.
So I am reading, what am I reading right now? I'm going through the really huge collection of the Robert Carver, like basically like one of those like Library of America, like Robert Carver things. And I'm also
Uh-huh.
reading, what other short story collection am I reading? I think the Lydia Davis collected short story. Yeah, basically, I feel like with short stories, I just try to do like one a day. Because I kind of feel like you can't sit down with a short story collection and read like 2 or 3 short stories in a day. You know what I mean? I kind of feel like
Yeah.
you really just got to let them sit. So I try to like piece those out. But yeah, I usually read several different novels at the same time and a few screenplays and stuff here and there too, whatever else. Really kind of mix it up. But my recommendation always, at least for writers, no matter what genre you want to write in, always read in other genres. Read outside of your genre. It's important, obviously, to read in your genre, but it's really good to like I also love really like a lot of literary stuff, like a T.C. Boyle. Like his writing is just amazing, and like certain literary novels or like novelists I'll go back to or other things. So yeah, reading outside the genre is always widely recommended.
Well, Robert, this has just been delightful. I feel like I could
Thank
talk to
you.
you for a lot longer, but we really can't. Um, I'm partial to the name Robert. That's my son's name, and it was my husband's name. So
All right.
I
Good.
just knew it was going to be a good chat when I said, "Oh, Robert." So I hope everybody runs out and gets The Girls in the Dark. Hold it up again. Because I'm telling you, don't start this about 10 o'clock at night if you have to get up and go to work the next morning because you won't stop reading. And it'll be one more chapter, one more chapter, one more chapter. And next thing you know, it'll be 4 in the morning and you're blurry eyed and can't do your job. So don't do that. But do go out and get it. Start it on a Saturday morning or something when you can sit in an uninterrupted kind of a Zen state and get involved in these characters' lives because it's a really, really gripping book. And we didn't even get into the discussion about Megan and the current day and all of the various implications of how she's living her life because that would kind of spoil it. But there's a whole other wrinkle here where she's written a book and we could have a whole big discussion. Maybe we'll have book club, and when people have read the book we can talk about all of that because that's another fascinating angle. Just a little tease for
Well,
people.
there's that too, and I will also say because I've had more than one. I haven't had a lot of people reach out to me about it, but I've had more than one person being like, "Are we going to get a sequel?" And the short answer
Mm.
is no, I don't think so. Like
Okay.
for me, books, there's always like a certain ending point for a story, and I just kind of felt like where we ended it. And honestly, the ending of this book, I feel is it's obviously in a way it's very dark, but in a weird way, I'd like it to be hopeful. You know what I mean? Like, despite the fact the reader knows what's going to happen, I almost kind
Yeah.
of feel like if they kind of ends almost on a hopeful note, that would be nice. But
Yeah.
I don't know, like the same thing too with like the chateau. I kind of ended in a certain way where I kind of feel like, you don't always have to, like, I don't know. I always feel like as a reader, I always don't have to be, you know, kind of force fed like, well, this is everything that happens then. You know what I mean? Like all the info is there. It should be enough. You know what I mean? I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you run, but thank you so much for joining me. Hit me up when you have the next book because I'll be happy to talk to you again.
Awesome. Thank you again so much. You have a great day.
All right. You two have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.